This video has been brought to you by the online learning community, Skillshare. It's finally happened. We got an R-rated, live-action Mortal Kombat movie. But how does it compare to the 1995 film, which to this day is widely regarded as the best video game movie ever made? We are about to find out. Let the commence. Now, both of these movies have nearly identical stories. The world is in danger of being taken over by Shang Tsung, and the good guys have to fight the bad guys to prevent that from happening. Except one movie has a tournament and the other does not. The 1995 movie tells the story from Liu Kang's point of view, as this is ultimately his story to get revenge on the murderer who killed his younger brother. And that is a great motivation to have us understand and follow him on his journey. In the 2021 movie, this role has been assigned to a new character that is not from the games, called Cole Young, and we will talk more about him in the characters segment. And another thing that these movies both have in common is that the opening is the best part of the film, and in the 1995 movie's case, I feel like it all goes downhill after this, as this opening is just so awesome. This makes my list of one of the best opening credits in a movie, and it really pumps you up and gives you this adrenaline rush and makes you pumped to see a bunch of fast-paced action sequences. And then the movie starts out with this slow motion fight scene. And granted, it has impact, but after that awesome opening, they should have played this fight out with a pace that was equally as fast as that opening scene. The opening of the 2021 movie, however, it felt like something from a samurai movie. It shows the origin of Scorpion and Sub-Zero and how their rivalry started. And aside from some editing problems, this was a great opening to the movie. And a third thing these movies have in common is that we essentially have a trio of characters to follow throughout most of the movie. And I liked the trio of Liu Kang, Johnny Cage and Sonya in the 95 film, and I honestly wouldn't have minded if the new movie followed that format too. As it stands, our trio of characters for a good chunk of this movie is Kano, Sonya and Cole, a much less interesting group, I gotta say, and this ultimately contributes to the film's weak story, and we are going to talk about the film's weak story right now. Right from the beginning, there is no emotional resonance in this film, and emotional resonance was not as important in the first film, as Liu Kang's brother dying was conveyed more as a plot device and was not portrayed as an emotional opening, but the death of Scorpion's family was, as it starts out with a man's wife and son being murdered and he being too late to save them. An old concept for a movie that we have seen done well plenty of times in other films, but the urgency of the situation just wasn't here like it was in those films. And although the action in this scene was great, it could have been more emotionally investing. You know, like it was in the animated Scorpions Revenge movie where his family also died, one of which being right in front of him. And you know it's bad when you have seasoned actors in the new movie, and yet it's the animated version that is far more emotional. And then as far as the rest of the story goes, the pacing in the 2021 movie is very choppy, such as when Scorpion runs to his family. We are given the impression that he has travelled quite a distance away from his home, hence he didn't hear the attack, but when he hears his wife scream, he runs home, and look how they edit the scene and how quick it takes for him to get back. That is just bad editing, and depriving this scene of his long run home took the panic and urgency out of his return, and they really could have honed in on his worried facial expressions here, but they didn't. I mean, even X-Men Origins Wolverine did this long run to his loved one much better, and the emotions in this scene was nowhere near as sad as it should have been. And this unfortunately happens throughout the movie, with its story, the world building and its introduction to the characters, and this compromises the story significantly. The 1995 movie, on the other hand, does a much better job of introducing you to this world. It also does a much better job of introducing you to each of these characters, and you are experiencing all of this weird stuff as they do, and you have the same questions that they do as well. So the movie does a very good job of bringing you along this journey with them. The 2021 movie just delivers non-stop exposition and quickly cuts from one scene to the next, even introducing big parts of the game's world, such as Outworld, as if it's nothing. And I am going to make a big statement here. The lack of direction with the actors, that's the director's fault. The super quick pacing, that's the studio's fault. Because the pacing in this movie is worse than Justice League. I am not exaggerating, and this reeks of studio runtime mandates. And the reason I am 100% sure of this is because both this and Godzilla vs. Kong have a runtime of around an hour and 50 minutes, including credits. And I know that is not a coincidence. I think Warner Brothers are giving their filmmakers a new mandate for the runtime. And if you thought the mandated 2-hour runtime with Justice League was misguided, then an hour and 50 minutes is even worse. So I am not going to blame the fast pacing of this movie on the director. I am fully putting the blame on Warner Brothers. And I wouldn't be surprised if, like the Godzilla vs. Kong director, this director also comes out and says that he had a longer version of the film too, and that the studio forced him to shorten it. And I'm telling you, Warner Brothers, this is not on, and it's going to result in the detriment of your movies. Don't believe me? Here's proof of that right now. The movie with the superior story is the 1995 film. Just 15 minutes into the 1999 movie, and already I liked watching the interactions between Liu Kang and Johnny Cage. I even love the way they talk about Raiden after seeing him use his abilities.
Is made out of electricity. I mean, how did he disappear like that? What is going on here? Who is this guy?
He's Raiden, god of lightning and protector of the realm of Earth.
Oh, great. Oh, there's your rational explanation.
How is it that when a Mortal Kombat movie acknowledges the stupidity of what we saw, I buy it, and when the MCU does it...
Look, I just need to know, because the city is flying. Okay, look, the city is flying. We're fighting an army of robots. And I have a bow and arrow. None of this makes sense.
It is just cringy and completely takes you out of the movie. The 1995 Mortal Kombat is showing the MCU up. That's how bad they can be at their quips and jokes. Even when someone like Raiden jokes after being serious, the joke is funny and again, doesn't make you cringe or feel like the tone is being compromised. It actually fits the tone of this movie. Now there are a good amount of jokes that don't work and feel lazily set up, but it just results in me not laughing. It doesn't make me cringe. This joke was the first one to make me laugh out loud. They see Goro's monstrous shadow, and then Johnny Cage says this.
Sonya, you go ahead. Find out what that was. Lou and I will wait right here.
And Sonya was a decent addition, and she also has a little revenge mission of her own as well. And even though it didn't fully work, I do admire that they tried to create a practical version of Goro, as opposed to resorting to CGI like they did with Reptile. And I really liked Liu Kang in this movie too, although my favourite character is obviously Johnny Cage. So overall, I really liked the characters in the 95 movie. Well, all except one. Katana is the character that I hate the most in this film. Every other character is in tone with this movie. They are all delightfully over the top and corny in their own charming way, but as soon as Katana shows up, the scenes become really slow as both her and Liu Kang just keep staring at each other. And then she starts speaking very slowly in the most dull voice, and every time she speaks, she is talking indirectly.
If you won't fight with all of your heart, there is no hope.
I mean, I know you're trying to speak to him in code so Shang Tsung doesn't hear you, but your code clearly isn't working because he is onto you and constantly telling you to stop.
To win your next match, use the element which brings life.
Katana!
Remember my words.
Katana! That's enough!
I can't believe she cracked your code.
At this point, she might as well have told him, use the damn water. It's funny how she thinks that she's being subtle here, and her inclusion in this movie really brings it down. When I was a kid, I never liked the film when she was in it, and as an adult, nothing has changed. And near the climax of the movie, Katana essentially is just saying the same dialogue that Raiden says.
You must first face your fears, if you are to conquer them.
And you must face your worst fear.
There is also another problem I had with two of the characters. When Johnny and Sonya have a talk about how they don't want the other to get hurt, it was probably the only character scene in the movie where it felt completely unearned and very poorly paced. I didn't even know the characters were at this point in their development yet, and hearing them talk to each other in this way just sounds so forced and overly dramatic. But besides that, I really like the main characters in this movie, both good and evil. As for the characters in the 2021 movie, well, the rapid pacing of this film's story really does them a disservice. You aren't allowed to get to know them like you do in the 1995 movie. On top of that, they don't really have a personality, and they don't seem that different from one another either. They just give exposition, fight, go to the next location, give exposition, meet another character, who also gives more exposition, and then they fight. And that's the cycle this movie goes through, and it does nothing to benefit the characters. The only scene where they all had a personality was the dinner scene. They don't talk a bunch of exposition, and they talk like real people here. And if this was an indication of what we could have gotten with the characters if there was no studio interference, then I think we would have been happy. As is, these characters are just flat and one-dimensional. Sonya looks like a cosplayer, Goro shows up and fights but doesn't get to kill anyone. This is especially a shame as that's really all you want to see Goro do, and I feel like the movie didn't showcase just how much of a cheat he is when you fight him, and it feels like they took him out very easily. Reptile's introduction was awesome, and I liked how they were forced to deal with his camouflaging ability, and it was a very creative fight.
Did you shoot it?
I think I clipped it.
It's camouflaged! Ah!
The only big downside is that they build up his acid attack and he never even used it, and that made his death feel so quick and like a missed opportunity. Nintara, the vampire girl, Shang Tsung keeps boosting her up as one of his best fighters and one he has the most faith in, and here's me thinking, oh, she must be a big and dangerous character if Shang Tsung is talking of her like this. So what does she do? Well, I'm not kidding when I say this, but she does the least out of all the characters. She doesn't even get to land one hit. They just cut straight to her death scene, and that's another thing that I mean about the runtime of this movie. Characters like Reptile, Goro, Melina, and Nintara just die so quickly, and aside from one fight, they don't get to kill anyone. They just die. In cool ways admittedly, but it would have been more satisfying to see them die if we actually saw them do some truly horrific and villainous stuff, and then get their deaths in the form of fatalities, but they just die in their first scenes, and it feels like we weren't done with them yet. I still wanted to see them fight and do their fatalities, but we don't get to see those, and then they just die. So in that way, I was not satisfied with many of these characters. Kano is the only one that I thought had the most personality, and he was my favorite character. His humor was great, and pretty much all of his jokes landed. Everyone seems to be in agreement that Kano steals the show in this movie, so much so that even the more negative reviews praise him, and I agree, he did a really great job. And Kano is just okay in the 95 version. He's too subdued and he comes off as someone who thinks he's being cool when he really isn't. He doesn't even get to use the laser in his eye. And his fight with Sonya is cool and the hits really have impact, but the fights end so quickly, making Sonya's revenge arc come across as lackluster and anticlimactic. And as for the design of the characters, some of them look great, but then there are others that look like discount versions of the characters from the 95 film. And as for Shang Tsung in both movies, the 1995 version of Shang Tsung left such an impact that they even modeled the game character after him in one of the most recent games. And for good reason, because he has a presence in the movie and he actually interacts with our characters in the 1995 film. In the 2021 movie, he certainly had the potential to be a great interpretation, but unfortunately, Lao from The Dark Knight doesn't really do anything. I mean, they at least fought Shang Tsung in the 95 movie, but he doesn't do anything except give generic "I will rule the world" dialogue here, and he overall leaves a much smaller impact in this film. Now, as I said, the character that I liked the best in this movie was Kano, but the characters I took the most seriously was Scorpion and Sub-Zero. And the movie really should have been about them, as their rivalry could have been something out of a samurai movie, and these two actors know how to fight for real. I mean, Hiroyuki Sanada was in The Wolverine, and he's a very well-known actor where he's from, and Joe Taslim was in the first Raid movie, and he is an absolute fighting monster in The Night Comes For Us, which was a badass action film, and not having the movie be about them is a big mistake. Now you might have noticed that there is another character that we haven't talked about, the most important part, although we all certainly didn't see him that way, Cole Young, and I'm just gonna cut straight to it. I didn't like this character. He is not terrible, but he feels like he's been plucked out of a completely different movie. When you see him, you don't think Mortal Kombat. And he even has the cliched moment where the characters give up, and then him being the new kid says, "No guys, we can't give up." And then someone says,
"So what's the plan?"
"We need to fight smarter. We need to control the fight."
Yeah, new guy. You go tell these trained experts what to do. I mean, after all, where would they be without you? It's just so lame and out of place. So both movies have some characters that are better and some that are worse. But the fact remains that in the 2021 movie, most of them don't even have time to be characters as they spout out so much exposition and don't have any time to be fleshed out characters. And aside from Kano, Sub-Zero, Scorpion, and Reptile, I don't think any of the characters were any better than their 1995 counterparts, including the villains. So the movie with the superior interpretations of the characters is the 1995 movie. And now it's time for the segment you have all been waiting for. It's time to talk about the action. But first, a word from our sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes. You can learn new skills, refine existing skills, and get completely lost in their courses. And it's less than $10 a month for an annual subscription. People often ask me what software I use and how I learn to edit my videos. Well, I use Adobe Premiere Pro CS6 and I learned the hard way, and it took me years of practice. But with Skillshare, you can learn all of the editing tricks that I've learned and more, and it won't take you anywhere near as long as it took me to learn learn those skills. I would highly recommend that you check out Geordie's class on advanced video editing with Adobe Premiere Pro, as it gives you a lot of great insights on the basics of video editing and then delves into more advanced stuff as the course goes on. And they keep releasing new high quality classes, so you will never run out of stuff to learn. And if you want to mix it up, you can choose to learn a plethora of other skills that you fancy, such as learning how to write your first movie script, graphic design work including visual effects, and so much more. And what's better is that it won't even cost you anything. Yep, the first 1,000 of you, my subscribers, to click the link in the description will get a free trial of Skillshare's premium membership. So go ahead and get learning. And a big thanks must go to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now, the big difference between both of these Mortal Kombat movies is the rating. The 1995 movie is PG-13 and the 2021 movie is rated R. Now, there was one moment in the 95 movie when I was like, hey, is that blood in a PG-13 movie? And then I realized, oh, it's just lava. That was a smart workaround though, I gotta say, because it did fool me for a second. The other difference between the two films is the 2021 movie's far superior CGI. As an example, just take a look at how Sub-Zero's ice powers are executed in the 1995 movie.
Move aside.
And now take a look at the way his powers are executed in the 2021 film. That is freaking awesome. That is so badass. And the actor Joe Taslim, who you will have seen in The Raid and The Night Comes For Us, is perfectly cast in this movie, as all you see is his eyes, and he gives off these terrifying slasher villain death stares. And a lot of the action in this movie is great, and it was very creative in parts. Although I gotta say, when they fight Reptile, who can camouflage himself, as good as this scene was, I thought it was taken right out of The Boys.
There you are. There you are.
And the fatalities are awesome to behold and very bloody. My only flaw with them is that I do think they could have been even bloodier, because as is, they are much less violent when compared to the games. And the hand-to-hand action scenes are good too, though just not great, because I don't feel as inclined to rewatch these action scenes again. In movies like The Raid 1 and 2 and Headshots and The Night Comes For Us, I have watched those action scenes so many times and they are still awesome. In Mortal Kombat, the only fights I can rewatch are between Scorpion and Sub-Zero, and that's because these two actors know how to fight in real life and is beautifully choreographed. All the others though, they're good, but they're not great. And there is also more of a personal rivalry between Sub-Zero and Scorpion, which makes their fights all the more meaningful. And going back to the violence, I like how in the action scene alone, he stabs him and then tries to slice him open. Even the music is better and more intense than the opening fight scene. You don't need an R rating to make the music more intense, so I don't get why the 95 movie never tried to compensate for the R rating by making its music and tone during the fights darker and more serious. They put too much emphasis on the fun factor rather than the brutal factor, which they could have done, even with a PG-13 rating. Although I will say that in the 1995 film's defense, some of the action in the 2021 movie feels rushed, like the scene where Sub-Zero is following our main characters.
Take the truck, get your family to safety. Now get out of here.
I mean, it makes no sense. Sub-Zero catches up to them once and he gives up running. They should have tried to escape from him several times and then have Jack say, "We can't escape him. I will buy you some time to run away. I will fight him off." It would make Sub-Zero all the more scarier, and it would make this self-sacrificing moment feel more earned. But again, Warner Brothers most likely mandated that hour and 50-minute runtime like they did with Godzilla vs. Kong, and although it was passable for that movie, it is a detriment to this film, even with its action sequences. And at some points, they don't even bother having a fight at all and just do the fatality. Thanks, Warner Brothers. Oddly enough, no one says fatality in this movie, and it's ironic that the R-rated movie never says it, but the PG-13 movie does. Now, a lot of people seem to be talking about a horror scene with Sub-Zero. I can only assume they were talking about this scene where Jax was looking for him, but the scene was over so quickly that you can hardly call this a horror scene. It could have been if the scene played out slower, but it just went by so quickly that there wasn't any time to make this a horror scene, as horror requires build-up, and there really wasn't any here. And as for the action of the 95 movie, I gotta say, the choreography I thought was quite nice, and it holds up pretty well. This is back when the director Paul W.S. Anderson would film his action so you could see it, but then then you get Robin Shou, who plays Liu Kang, and he is also an actor that can fight for real. So his fight scenes again look very convincing. And going back to the CGI, there are some effects that looked great for the time, but look fake now. Like a really good effect to me was when Scorpion would let that claw out of his hand. It always looked real and gross to me back in the day, but now I can see the CGI-ness of it, and it hasn't aged as well. Also, the fight with Goro was the worst. I mean, I applaud them for trying to do an action scene with a prop like this, but the lack of blood here really is a detriment to this fight, because without it, the punches he lands don't even have the slightest bit of impact. I honestly get more of a brutal impact from the battle with Kano and Sonya, or the final attack that Liu Kang delivered in his battle. This one was just underwhelming, and it wasn't even PG-13, it was just PG. When Johnny faced Goro though, I had no idea what he was gonna do. The tension was building, and then he did the most perfect thing that stayed true to his character. That was so good. Although I gotta say that after that, he took Goro out so easily it's not even funny. So the action in both movies is good, but yes, the blood, the more modern day choreography, the moves taken straight out of the game, it's all a lot better and is far more entertaining and true to the fights that you would want from a Mortal Kombat movie. So the action scenes have pros and cons in both films, but it's obvious that the movie with the superior action is the 2021 movie. My biggest fear with the 2021 Mortal Kombat is with how the movie ends. It ends with Cole saying that he's heading to Hollywood, and we all know what that means. Johnny Cage is going to be in the sequel, and it also means that Cole is going to continue to be our main character as the films go on, and I don't like that. I was okay following his character in this movie, but to know that he's going to continue to be our main protagonist in every future installment of this franchise does not excite me. In fact, it just concerns me and makes me feel less excited in watching the future movies, knowing that so much time will continue being dedicated to him. And here's something that will blow your mind. In the UK, the age rating for the 2021 Mortal Kombat is exactly the same as the rating for the 1995 film. They are both rated 15 in the UK. Now the 95 film is a light 15, whereas the 21 movie is a hard 15. Either way, it's not rated what it should be, which is an 18. All the Mortal Kombat games have been rated 18, and the movie being rated 15 just goes to show that they didn't take the violence as far as they should have. And there are other action movies that are 18, like the Raid 1 and 2, The Night Comes For Us, Kill Bill, and so on and so forth. And it's not a good look that a Mortal Kombat movie that was touted as being so violent that it made some of the actors sick only got a 15. There are also parts of this movie that look really cinematic, but then there are other parts that look cheap. And the same goes for the lighting in the movie. Now visually I like the look of the 1995 film, even though it clearly looks like a movie that was made the same year as Batman Forever, but it does have its own cheap looking moments too. This boat looks like an attraction at a theme park ride. Now I respect the work that went into the 2021 film, as this is from a first time director, and I gotta say, he did better with the action scenes than many experienced directors do, so I really do respect him for that. The true downfalls with this movie though is from the obvious studio interference. It's time for the scores. Mortal Kombat 1995 gets a 6 out of 10, and Mortal Kombat 2021 gets a 5. The action is superior in the 2021 movie, that I can happily admit, but the poor pacing and weaker interpretation of most of the characters, as well as the addition of Cole, it really takes away from the overall movie for me, and although it wins all the points for the action, it loses its points for pretty much everything else. And I feel like this could have largely been rectified if Warner Brothers let the director make the movie longer, but they didn't, because they can't help themselves. They always like to get their hands in there and start interfering, and then we end up with dumpster fires like this. But to be honest, both of these are subpar Mortal Kombat movies. The far superior Mortal Kombat movie is the animated feature Mortal Kombat Scorpions Revenge. It's far more violent, the story focuses on Scorpion and Sub-Zero like the 2021 movie should have, and the other characters have a place in the story too. And when you watch it, you will constantly think to yourself, how does the much shorter 1 hour and 20 minute animated version have much better story, pacing and character development than a 1 hour and 50 minute live action version? And to top it off, the movie is rated 18, just like the game, and that rating is very well deserved. And this is the kind of movie that we should have gotten in live action. So, those are my thoughts on the two Mortal Kombat movies. They both have their ups and downs, but overall, I think they both fail at being satisfying Mortal Kombat movies. And who knows, maybe the uncut version of this film was the great Mortal Kombat movie that we were looking for. But as long as we have Warner Brothers at the helm, it is going to be very hard for any director to make one.